So after all these years, I finally played through Castlevania 64, a game I kind of remember renting when it came out, but not having any very strong feelings or memories of it, and a game that would eventually become the brunt of much scorn in an onslaught of angry game reviews looking back upon this oddity of the series. But with an open mind and heart, I brushed off my past dismissal of the N64 as a whole, and dove right into this experience, drenched with fog and dread, and surprisingly embarked on a brain-breaking personal journey of multi-dimensional proportions.
Courage. Don't leave me.
I've been a fan of the older Castlevania games since I was a kid, with very fond memories of the NES titles, yes, even Simon's Quest in some ways, along with the absolute bangers on SNES and the Genesis, and of course the now renowned masterpiece Symphony of the Night. But the series' first foray into 3D was always a bit of an outlier. I'd say it's easy for even the hardcore fans of that system to admit that the N64 in general has aged weirdly. It was the Wild West of 3D game development, and the cartridge-based console would seem to be increasingly difficult for developers to work with, resulting in those low-poly universes lacking very much draw distance and washed over with texture blur, and often viewed through the lens of a chaotic camera operator. As 3D gaming would get more and more refined, this era of games has seen its fair share of reviling, admittedly myself included in that. In the past, I've memed about playing N64 as being some form of psychological torture, which maybe isn't too off base in a few specific exceptions. But in parallel to that, I've also become immensely appreciative of experiencing what you could call jank. Games full of imperfections, awkwardness, and unconventional design, adorned with cursed and raw pixel art that doesn't conform to any trends. There's something uniquely charming about these so-called awful games, not only as an alternative to the overpolished and bloated modern AAA titles being churned out today, but as a fun and satisfying way to overcome the challenges of wonky and weird play controls, or navigating through programming seemingly held together by duct tape, doing your best to keep the game world from coming apart at the seams. Your mileage may vary, but the deeper I dig into the janky side of video game history, I find this world to be immensely fun to explore. So getting back to Castlevania 64, while starting it up for the first time in years, I was intentionally open-minded to have some fun on stream with the janky mess that I thought would likely ensue, but was honestly surprised. This game wasn't nearly the level of hot mess that some pockets of the internet would have you believe it to be. Despite the burden of high expectation as a Castlevania title, which up to that point was one of the most beloved 2D horror action franchises of the era, it's pretty clear to see the intent of the game design here, and it was an admirable experiment into unknown territories. The game starts out in a quiet and very foggy forest as you awkwardly fumble around with a new control scheme, coming to terms with targeting unending hordes of skeletons, exploring this muddy-looking world in search of switches to open gates, also while quickly finding out that the camera is likely being controlled by Dracula himself, as it will undoubtedly cause you to fall off of a platform or two. Compared to the usual rock opera-driven whip-cracking action we were used to, Castlevania 64 starts out with a pretty drastic contrast. And as you keep pushing forward, the game gets further ambitious and starts making full use of that magical third dimension that has been opened up here. Boss fights take on a more massive and impactful scale, powered with the freewheeling creative juice in the now iconic skeletons on motorcycles. At this point, you can tell Konami wanted to have some fun with this too, and certainly had to have been a monumental challenge to undertake. Building brand new tools alongside such an ambitious project that ultimately had a lot of content trimmed off in order to actually get released in a timely fashion, we'd eventually get an enhanced remake prequel kind of thing called Legacy of Darkness to revive some of the additional stuff, a game that I definitely want to explore further at some point. Speaking of exploring, as you delve further into the castle, the game leans more into the exploration aspect, blending in some survival horror vibes and mechanics, executed successfully by games like the original Resident Evil, and eventually puts you through a notoriously tricky chase sequence through a hedge maze, and the now infamous Magical Nitro section. Oh, Magical Nitro. Okay. Just running will not cause an explosion, but one jump or hit and the story's over. Carry it carefully. Oh no. Wait, one jump? What? What? That's pretty good. Oh, I jumped. God. I just can't get hit. Ah, no. He's gonna hit me, I know it. Yep. I am gonna... Oh, God. Whoa. No. What? What the... That's... Why am I not thinking straight there now? It's undeniably an annoying and absolutely troll moment of the game, but actually rather satisfying to finally get through if you have the patience. And from there, the game shifts focus again into more action-packed combat and platforming areas. By this point, I was feeling much more comfortable with the controls and was having an unexpected amount of fun in this world, and really realizing how impressive all of this was for the time. It's probably a victim of a bit of a jack-of-all-trades, master-of-none syndrome, where all the ideas don't necessarily gel together into a cohesive way, and the levels felt a little disjointed if you look at the big picture. But for the time, this pastiche of different mechanics in a richly atmospheric world was absolutely a brave experiment that executed on its intentions well enough, and surely set a subtle new standard for 3D action games to follow. Rather than dig too much deeper into the game's content and mechanics, which has honestly been done very well already in a few other videos I've seen that have re-examined this game with a similar optimistic lens, let's get a little personal here. If anything, this whole experience of dusting off this old neglected console seemed to run parallel to a lot of other things in my own life that have been running through my mind lately. When going through some difficult changes, I found a lot of benefit in discovering new perspectives. Not unlike this awkward and somewhat painful shift from 2 to 3 dimensions, broadening your scope to new ideas and opinions can unlock so many new ways of thinking and transforming your mindset in ways to improve your outlook on life. Realizing my dismissal of the N64 library might be keeping me away from finding gems in the rough like this one, and realizing that closed-mindedness could be leaking through in other ways. It was a perfect reminder to approach things without expectations, as their influence on your experience and enjoyment might be more affected by this than you think. Just stay positive and let the jank wash over you. Aside from that, Castlevania 64 also proved to be an injection of creative energy in my own work, reaffirming the importance of experimenting, trying fresh approaches to problems to see what works and what doesn't. Keep failing over and over again, and have fun in the process. Persevere long enough, and you will find that path, and don't panic if it wasn't the original one you thought you had set out on. Accept things for what they are, embrace imperfections, and use technical limitations as a way to be even more creative with your problem solving. The struggle is the thing that makes victory feel so sweet in the end. Thanks for watching, and a super special thanks to those supporting on Patreon and on Twitch, as this game was selected for a new monthly content poll for supporters that have just started. Obviously, I was pleasantly surprised and profoundly changed by this one, and truly appreciate those who believe in what I'm doing. We'll catch you next time.